Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Tuesday class with the mantras. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswaha, Tatsavitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Naha Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, मृत्योर्मा अमृतम गम्य ओम सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सवीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्वी नावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति 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 ओम. Let's open our Mahabharata book, and this is part 2 and towards the end actually. Okay, and page number 599. Title of this chapter is Dharma, and we saw last week in the previous chapter that Pandavas, accompanied by Lord Krishna and some other relatives also, they go to Bhishma Pitama, who is lying down on the bed of arrows, and they are there to get some advice. Lord Krishna is the one who advised Yudhishthira to go to the grandfather and get some advice before he leaves the body. So another time Yudhishthira asks, so Yudhishthira is asking different questions. So what did he ask? They say intelligence is superior to everything else. Intelligence helps a man plan for the future. To provide for it, with intelligence, a man meets every emergency. Pitama, tell me about intelligence and how to use it. Especially when a king is beset by many enemies, how does he protect himself with intelligence? Okay. So intelligence is that buddhi part in our antakaran. How to use it? We all have it, but how to use it? When a king is in distress, he often finds that a friend becomes a foe and an enemy a friend. So that means you cannot see it clearly. There are times when fate makes everything uncertain and a king hardly knows what to do. There are times when an enemy must be befriended and times when a friend must be treated as an enemy. What a king does depends on the times, and the king who does not hesitate to do what the time demands seldom fails, while a king who is unbending seldom succeeds. Of course, a man must be investigated thoroughly before he is accepted as a friend. Enemies must be studied even more carefully, their every strength and weakness examined. In this life, which is a play of masks, often friends appear in the guise of foes and foes disguised as friends. The terms friend and enemy are relative. When a man suits one's interests, he is a friend. When he opposes them, he is an enemy. If a man serves one's purpose as long as he lives, he is a lifelong friend. Ultimately, friendship and enmity are matters of self-interest. Selfishness is the most powerful impulse in every man. The world turns on this pivot. No man is precious to another unless he stands to gain by him. Of course, men's needs are varied, and one man is popular because he is liberal-minded, another because he is sweet-tongued, and a third because he is religious. Like-minded people generally become friends until time changes their affections. It is a rule and not the exception that friendship lasts as long as they serve some purpose. As soon as the reason for the friendship ends, so does the friendship itself. An intelligent man knows when to make peace with an enemy. When two enemies become friends, it is obvious that each one only bides his time until he can get the better of the other. And it is invariably true that the wiser and the more patient of the two is the one that succeeds. Until the proper opportunity presents itself, you must pretend there is no one dearer to you than your enemy, no one you trust as much. When the time comes, never hesitate to wage war. Yudhishthir, this policy applies not only with enemies, but friends as well. Another day, Yudhishthir asks, Pitama, what is the font of sin? From where does evil spring? Greed is the single root of evil. Greed destroys dharma and punya. From this single spring, the river of sin flows. When a man covets, he becomes full of hypocrisy and cunning. Anger and lust come from covetousness, and so do 100 other sicknesses of the mind. The loss of judgment comes from it. Deception, arrogance, malice, vindictiveness, shamelessness, the loss of virtue, anxiety, and infamy all spring from covetousness. These are not all. Miserliness, cupidity, arrogance of birth, arrogance of learning, of beauty, of wealth, every impropriety, harshness of speech, speaking ill of others, ruthlessness, malevolence, insincerity, gluttony, a love of lies, indeed a love of every kind of sin, all sprout from the root of covetousness. My son, no man in this world has been able to relinquish greed. Life on earth may decay, men may diminish in numbers and stature, but the power of greed will never fade. Even the greatest men, those of deep learning, whose minds are a treasury of the scriptures, those who are so able to advising others, these are found wanting when it comes to managing their own lives. Greed nestles in their hearts and makes them weak and cowardly, its slaves. Tell me about ignorance, Pitama, says Yudhishthira. Ignorance too springs from the same covetousness. As greed grows, so does ignorance, and the mind becomes dark and hardly sees clearly anymore. Yudhishthira is thoughtful, then asks, what are the first duties of a king which must have precedence over the rest? Restraint is the quintessential dharma. Just as giving in to his greed leads a man to every sin, restraining himself leads him to glory. From restraint comes the virtues of compassion, forgiveness, patience, mercy, impartiality, truth, sincerity, humility, modesty, steadiness, tolerance, and liberty. Serenity, contentment, sweetness of speech, benevolence, and a heart free of malice. A restrained man will never be a slave to the attachments of this world, nor to his greed. Once he learns to restrain himself, he is already upon the threshold of moksha. Tell me about the truth, my lord, if you are not tired. Bhisham smiles. All my pain and tiredness left me when Krishna blessed me. Truth is the dharma not just of kings, but every human being. Truth is the eternal dharma. It is the final sanctuary, the last tapasya. Truth is the highest yoga. Why? It is the immortal Brahma. There is no yajna as profound as truth. The three worlds are founded in truth and nothing else. There are many aspects to truth, Yudhishthira. Impartiality, self-control, forgiveness, modesty, endurance, goodness, renunciation, contemplation, dignity, fortitude, compassion, and non-violence are some. But the truth itself is single, eternal, immutable. What must a man strive for in his life? All the living are in death's shadow. The nights come and go, but every moment death draws nearer. Death waits for no man. It frequently arrives before a man's desires in this life have been fulfilled. Even when a man is plucking flowers in his garden, death snatches him away like a tiger, a ram. So, my child, avoid procrastination in your life. Finish today what you had planned to do tomorrow. Do in the morning what you had left for the afternoon. Time is always shorter than we believe, and a man must acquire virtue as quickly as he can. Thus, one must be ready for death. For he comes at his whim, without notice. Only virtue bestows fame in this world and the next. On earth, man is plagued by 1,000 desires, endlessly. He grows attached to possessions and people. He grows attached to places and houses, his work, his home, his lands, his wife, and children all weave a subtle web of bondage. Death brutally tears every thread. Nothing but truth can resist the web of attachment. When a man realizes how ephemeral this world is, he sees the truth. Then death holds no fear for him. For the fear of death springs from attachment. In every man, there are the seeds of death and the seeds of freedom. It is left to each man which seeds he chooses to nurture. It always seems the seeds of attachment are easier to nourish, but the truth of time is otherwise. Thus, the wise man restrains his senses. He rises above desire and anger. He learns how to treat pleasure and pain alike. Serenity comes to him, and then nirvana. What he thinks and what he says, what he does, all his life is founded in Brahma. And such a man does not die, but is born to eternal life. There is no vision like knowledge, and truth is the greatest tapasya. Attachment is the most terrible sorrow, and relinquishment the only deepest joy. Yudhishthir, we are born from Brahma, the eternal current. By Brahma, we are born. If we devote ourselves to that supreme spirit, we can return to Brahma. My son, always seek the self hidden in the deepest cave of the heart. Yudhishthir asks, which is the man whom all the world loves? Who is he that is perfectly accomplished? He will be learned, good, and wise. He is never so proud that he will lose his composure from arrogance. He is contented and serene. His senses do not lead him astray, and he is always possessed of the peace that comes from knowing the supreme truth. Why does a man become a sinner or virtuous? How does he achieve relinquishment and liberation? It is desire that makes a man sin. When he grows so attached to the objects of the senses that he will do anything to gain them. With attachment, the mind becomes clouded and a man abandons the path of virtue. When he is no longer virtuous, he pretends to be so and becomes a hypocrite. The acquisition of wealth by hypocrisy is not difficult, and the man plunges down the way of sin. He does not listen any longer to the advice of elders and wise men, and soon there's hardly any hope of salvation for him. The man of Dharma always seeks the welfare of others. He is sage and knows how to avoid the pitfalls of the senses, how not to let them rule him. He knows the difference between brief, empty pleasure and true joy. A man is virtuous when he is a master of his senses. But just this does not give him freedom. He must practice renunciation. So desire itself leaves him slowly. At the final stage, knowing this world is merely a passing pageant in death's halls, the virtuous man casts off his very virtue and its rewards. Heaven and happiness. He sets out to seek moksha, the unchanging condition. What are the qualities a man needs to be free from attachment to achieve moksha? The man who is near moksha has passed beyond the senses and their world. Hunger and thirst do not approach him. His body makes no demands. His mind has grown far beyond anger, greed, and sin. He never forgets himself, the truth that is within him. A bamboo hut and a king's palace are the same to such a man. Pain and pleasure do not touch him. He knows both are conceived in delusion. He sees the world clearly as only the coming together of the five elements. Pain, pleasure, loss, gain, defeat, and victory are all the same to him. Fear and anxiety lay no claim on his heart. He knows that 1,000 kings of majesty have lived briefly and then passed on from the earth. He knows the essence of the life. He has learned the truth that all things in the world are fleeting, insubstantial. With such wisdom, he attains moksha, be it in the jungle or in his home. The spiritually inclined Yudhishthir is intrigued. He asks, how can a man attain moksha without leaving his home and its bonds and going into the forest? Bhishma says, a king need not abandon his kingdom to attain nirvana. Only he must not be attached to his throne. So too with everything else in life, your wife, children, work, or wealth. If you can turn your mind away from all these to the eternal Brahm, you will find salvation. Your state of mind is what is important, not where you are. Knowledge comes from relinquishment, and yoga, which is union, comes after knowledge. If his spirit is enlightened, it does not matter if a man lives in his home or in the forest. He is a sannyasi. Yet another day, Yudhishthira asks, where is the Devi of prosperity to be found? She dwells in the eloquent man, the active man, the attentive man. If a man is high-minded, free of anger, and has his passions under control, prosperity comes to him. A man of little energy does not find the goddess of prosperity, nor does he who is full of anger, or he who is difficult. She lives with the Brahmins who are devoted to studying the Vedas, Kshatriyas who are men of Dharma, Vaishyas who are absorbed in their trade, and Shudras who are Bhagats. What should be the dharma of a man who wants to pass pleasantly through this world and have heaven in the next? There are 3 sins of deeds such a man must avoid: killing, thieving, and adultery. He must avoid 4 sins of speech: evil talk, harsh words, lies, and speaking ill of others. He must resist 3 sins of the mind: coveting what belongs to someone else, injuring another in his heart, and disbelief in the scriptures. If a man can avoid these 10 sins, he passes safely through this world and finds Swarga for himself. Is there any virtue superior to brahmacharya? What is the highest punya, grandfather? Which is the greatest purity? Abstinence from wine and meat is superior to celibacy. Indeed, you can hardly aspire to being a brahmachari if you cannot first control what you eat and drink. Dharma is the highest punya. It is also the greatest purity. Which are the times in life for dharma, earth, and calm? The first part of a man's life is for earning wealth. Then dharma must be followed, and the enjoyment of calm comes after. Remember, one should not attach to any of these, but always be reaching beyond them for moksha. Another time, Yudhishthir asks, which is the holiest tirth? All the tirths can purify a man, for they are all blessed. But my son, there is no tirth like truth. The deepest, fathomless tirth is the mind. It is in that tirth one should bathe, for it is the most untainted of all holy waters. If a man bathes in the Mansahas Sarovar, called truth, he becomes sincere and gentle, truthful, compassionate, restrained, and tranquil. Who is man's truest friend? Is it his mother, his son, his guru, or his companion? When a man dies, he abandons his body as if it were no more than a clod of earth. Who is the friend who follows a man into the next world? Bhisham smiles. When man is born alone, my child, and so too he dies. Whether he knows it or not, he is quite alone all through his wondrous journey called life. Once you are dead, who stays with you? Your mother and father, children and guru, your friends, and all the others turn away from your funeral pyre and return to their own lives. But Yudhishthir, Dharma follows you out of this world. Dharma stays with a man even after he is dead. At last, Dharma is the only true friend. There is a lot else that Yudhishthir asks his Pitama, and Bhisham answers the Kuru king patiently, giving freely of his wisdom to the Pandav. At last, one evening, Yudhishthir asks his last questions. In this world, who is the one God in whom we may seek final refuge? Who is the God I can worship and have everything I want from him? Which is the one true religion that is above all others? Which is the mantra by which a man can free himself from the bonds of life and death? Bhisham takes Yudhishthir's hand. His face full of light, he says, my son, Krishna is Lord of the universe. He is the God of gods, who has come among us as a man. There is no one greater than him. Among all the stars in all the ages, he pervades the Akhand. And if you meditate on him and his many names, you will pass beyond every sorrow. Bhisham smiles. You ask me which the greatest religion is? It is Krishna. He is the highest tapasya, the final refuge, and the holiest one. He is the beginning of creation and its end. Dark Krishna is the eternal Brahm. He is the Paramatma, Lord of the past, the present, and the future. Surrender to him, Yudhishthir, and you will find eternal bliss, the place beyond change. Bhisham keeps Yudhishthir's hand in his for some time, and they are lost in a living silence as the sun sets. Yudhishthir is content. Like cobwebs from his mind, his Pitama wisdom has brushed away his doubts and anxieties. His heart is full of faith again. The tiredness and despair of the war have all but left him. Muni Vyas arrives there. He says to Bhishma, you have restored Yudhishthir's faith. Why he glows with it? And now, great one, your treasure of wisdom will remain in this world for a time more. Bhisham lays his hand on Pandav's head. You have no more questions. Go back to your kingdom now and begin your reign, and let it be a just and prosperous one. I know your heart, Yudhishthir. Your subjects will be as happy as the people of the earth were when Nahush, Harishchandra, and Yayati ruled them. Bless you, my son. Go now and live a joyful life. But when the sun turns north again or Uttarayan come back to me, I must see you once more at that time. Ah, the time I have waited for all this long life. Yudhishthira takes the dust from his Pitama's feet. He kisses his hands tenderly and walks away from him as night falls. Full of new hope, the Pandavas return to Hastinapur. Slowly, the memories of the war begin to fade from their minds, and they have sense of a new day dawning in their lives. Quiet joy is upon them, welling in their hearts. On Kurukshetra, profound peace again unfolds. Bhisham upon his uncommon bed, his heart is as light as the air, soaring. At last he knows he has no task left in this world to fulfill. Death draws near like an old friend. Next chapter, the passing of a patriarch. The days pass and the sun turns north. That morning of the solstice, Yudhishthir and his brothers return to Kurukshetra, where Bhisham still lies. With them come Dhritarashtra and Krishan, Gandhari, Kunti, Draupadi, Satyaki, Vidur, and Yuyutsu. They bring flowers, incense, silks, sandalwood, jewels, rice grains, and fruit. Bhisham knows his time has finally arrived. He lies waiting. All Hastinapur follows its king to the field of fate. Bhisham lies with his eyes shut. Vyas, Parashar, Narad, and the Munis from Devlok surround him. Yudhishthir approaches the patriarch, takes his hand and says, Pitama, it is I, Pandu's son Yudhishthir. All of us have come as you wanted. Dhritarashtra is here, my lord, Krishan is here. The people have come to pay homage to you. I beg you, open your eyes and look at them. For a moment, Bhisham does not respond. Then slowly his eyes flutter open and they are far away, as if they already saw other worlds. Bhisham sees a sea of people around him. A faint smile touches his lips. He says softly but very clearly, Yudhishthir, my son, I am happy to see you with our people. At last, Surya Dev has turned his chariot north again. I have lain here for some 60 days more. I feel 100 years have passed. Now finally it is time for me to leave this earth. Bhisham turns his gaze to Dhritarashtra. My son, you know the Dharma of a king. Yes, you are wise. There's nothing you do not know. All that happened was by fate. None of it could be helped. Don't grieve over your sons who died. Pandu's sons are with you. Treat them as your own. Be fulfilled in them. Be joyful with them. Bhisham pauses, then says to Yudhishthir, fetch me some flowers, child. I want to worship Krishna. The flowers come. Bhisham worships Krishna ritually, and his eyes are so very bright. The Kuru ancient says fervently, you are the Lord of the universe. You are the creator of this earth. I beg you, Krishna, show me your Vishwarupa and let me leave this world forever. Bless me that I find the highest sanctuary. Though all the others see no change in Krishna, Bhisham's eyes see his cosmic form. Infinite, ineffable. Krishna takes Bhisham's hand. He says, Devrat, return to your home on high. Go back to the Vasus, and never again shall you be born into this world of men. As for your death, why, you are like Markandeya. Death waits for you. You can summon him when you want. Bhisham's face is lit by a brilliant smile, and the people see a miracle before their eyes. Devrat shuts his eyes and calls his death to him. The people of Hastinapur see Bhisham's body blaze with light, and limb by limb, from his feet up, the arrows that pierced him fall out, and his wounds vanish. Then the uncanny luster rises and leaves his body through the subtle opening on his skull. Scintillating, Bhisham's soul ascends into heaven. The sky is full of music, a fine breeze blows, laden with the scents of 1,000 flowers of Devlok. The earth is cool and mild, and the heart of every man and woman is full of the peace beyond understanding. They make a pyre of sandalwood on Kurukshetra. Yudhishthir and Vidur wrap Bhisham's body in cerements of silk. They cover him with flowers. In a solemn procession, the Pandavas bring their Pitama on his final journey, while Yuyutsu holds the while parasol over him. They lift the Kuru patriarch onto the fragrant pyre. Around him they lay the 100 arrows that brought him down. The Brahmins and Munis all chant the Psalm hymns, and Dhritarashtra touches Devrat's pyre alight with a burning branch. Yudhishthir, his brothers Vidur and Dhritarashtra stand to the right of the blazing sandalwood. All of them cry as flames clasp the greatest man who ever lived, make ashes of his body. Early the next morning, they collect Bhisham's remains, bones, the fire spared and ashes, and come to the Ganga. As they offer tarpan to the departed one, suddenly the river stops flowing. Ganga rises from her waters, lamenting. She says to the other mourners, my child is dead, and there was no one like him in all the world. He was a devoted son. He was invincible. Even Bhargav could not vanquish him. Today you have come to float his ashes down my currents. For Shikhandi, who was not even a man, killed my child. O Devrat, all my hopes for you have been proved vain. I thought you would be king of the earth, and now look what is left to me. She sobs inconsolably as the others watch in some awe. Then Krishna goes to her and says, don't cry for your son, mother of the world. You know he was your child only briefly. You know who Bhisham was before he was cursed to a mortal life. He was not merely a man, and he could not be merely a king like one. He was not just a Kshatriya, he could not be killed like one. The time of Bhisham's curse has ended, and he has returned to his kingdom in Devlok, where he sits on a loftier throne than any of his earth. Your son is a Dev, and he is with the Devas again. Rejoice, Mother Ganga, and that at last your Devrat is free. Shimmering Ganga bows gravely to Krishna. Her eyes still tear-laden. She vanishes. When they look at the golden river, they see that she flows again, as she has since the world began. Now standing in the water, after offering tarpan to his dead Pitama, Yudhishthir breaks down. Sobs shake him, and he staggers out from the river with Bhima helping him. Yudhishthir sits on the river bank, covers his face in his hands, and grief convulses him. His mood passes to his brothers, and all of them sob like children as wild remorse grips their hearts. Before the war began, Dhritarashtra had sent a message to Yudhishthir through Sanjay. He had said Yudhishthir should abandon all thoughts of war because, with his gentle nature, even if he won, he would regret it even after. The blind king had not been wrong. As Yudhishthir sits crying like an orphan, Dhritarashtra comes to comfort him. The uncle raises his nephew up compassionately and enfolds him in an embrace. Dhritarashtra says, come, my son, you cannot lose control of yourself. You are a king now. You have a kingdom to care for. Look at Gandhari and me, Yudhishthir. What is your loss compared to ours? What is your remorse compared to ours? All you did was dharma, and you have not sinned. That is not true of us. And we have lost 100 sons. Come, my son, this is no time for tears, but for courage and fortitude. Krishna also comes and takes Yudhishthir's hand. The dark one says, Yudhishthir, your Pitama taught you everything he knew before he left us. You are setting all that at nothing. What will your people do if you give in to yourself like this? Yudhishthir controls himself, and they return to Hastinapur. So this is the end of this Parva also. So next Parva is the 14th Parva, Ashwamedh Parva. And we'll start from that next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.